I, Mark from Enchantment of Eternity, I have come forth to review this episode with a ridiculously long title. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, which is episode 8 of season 3 of Star Trek, the original series. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my user polls. The episode to win my latest poll for the original series is For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. Now, this was actually a tie. The poll was a tie, and I've sort of cut it off like 4 days after I made the poll, so maybe one of the other episode might win the tie, but too bad, too late. I decided to end it and choose between For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky and Plato's Stepchildren. Both season 3 episodes, but in the case of ties, I am the deciding vote, and I decided I'd rather review this episode because I really don't like the Stepchildren. Anywho, if you didn't catch, if it's been a while since you've seen the episode, you may not recall what I was referencing there in that little intro, because that's the way they talk, particularly that woman that McCoy's love interest in this episode. Let's see if I can find her name. Natira. She always talks like really weird, and she says that, "It is I." Like when she talks to the Oracle, not the one from the Matrix, but the computer that controlled this asteroid thing. She comes up, "It is I, Natira," and I wanted the Oracle to be like, "Yeah, I know who the fuck you are," but anyway. Yeah, she had that sort of grandiose way of speaking, which I thought was actually kind of funny. Anywho, you know what? I've heard from several people that despise this episode and absolutely hate it and can't stand it. I guess, did I give the synopsis? I guess I should do that. So, synopsis of this episode: McCoy finds out he has a year to live, and he's going to die of disease, and they come across this asteroid that's actually a ship, a hollowed out ship, but everyone who lives inside of it thinks it's a world because it was launched like 10,000 years ago by their ancestors, and there's this evil computer that controls the society, but there's a really attractive woman who runs the society, and McCoy decides to get married to her and stay behind, and Kirk and Spock have to try to find a way to prevent this ship from destroying, because it's on a collision course with a populated world that could kill, billions of people. But eventually, of course, McCoy helps them and convinces his new wife to fight this evil Oracle, and they're able to stop it and reprogram the ship and defeat the Oracle. But they find the miracle cure for McCoy, and he's able to miraculously survive, and he goes back to the Enterprise, and his new love interest stays behind to rule this asteroid as they will approach their actual destination safely in a year. So, as I was saying, I think that I've heard several people who really didn't like this episode, my sister being one of them, and it's funny because this episode never bothered me that much. I always looked at it as just okay, like something that's like, yeah, whatever, it's kind of a throwaway. I mean, there's a lot of terrible episodes in season 3, but I don't think that's one of them. And honestly, season 3, at one point in my life, I even would call it my favorite season of the original series, but looking back on it, that's not an accurate statement, but in some ways I like it better than season 2. It depends, because it definitely has more horrible episodes than season 2, but season 2 was like really bland, where I think the season 3 episodes, they weren't shown as much on TV and they weren't glorified as much, so to me, I always viewed the season 3 episodes as kind of a hidden gem, and everyone focuses more on season 1 and 2, which brought a bit of intrigue. So the episodes that don't totally suck, like In the Children Shall Lead and Lights of Zatar and stuff like that. For those episodes that don't, and Spock's Brain, let's not forget about that. But for the ones that don't totally suck, they always intrigued me a bit more, especially the ones that didn't get much play, like Spectre of the Gun and the Enterprise Incident. That got a little bit of play, but these like rare episodes that seem to go by unnoticed, they always intrigued me a bit more. Now, when I did research for like what the popular opinion of this episode was, and they tend to actually, because I thought everyone would hate it because of all that seemed to be the vibe I was getting, but when I was looking up research like IMDb and other websites, most people tend to agree with me that it's that's okay, that's a fine episode, whatever. And most people would, I think would call it average. And watching it again, it's it was I actually kind of liked it, to be honest. Now, when I first saw this episode, I was back in the 90s when I first started watching the original series, Next Generation. I would tape every episode off the TV on syndication on VHS, because of course this is the early 90s, before the day of streaming services or even DVD collections, so that the only way to watch these older episodes is to watch it on syndication on TV, where you are at mercy of what they were playing, or to go out and buy each episode individually on VHS for $15, which was a proposition that was ridiculously expensive. So, and plus, you would have to have a huge, it's funny, people had these shelves full of all these VHS tapes, and nowadays you can just, I mean, not even nowadays, but a couple decades later, you could just get a DVD that's compact that have all of it. But nowadays, you just have a little, you can have it digital. But anyway, 90s, very different era. I feel like it back in my day, but anyway. So I recorded, this is one we recorded off the TV and I had it on the VHS, so I would watch the VHSs, and this is how I'd see the episodes multiple times. But for this episode, and I didn't actually, I think it was my sister who recorded it off the TV, so I didn't actually see it when it was airing. And we missed the first 10-15 minutes of it, or 5 or 10 minutes of it. And so that was my sort of first encounter and most frequent encounter, was missing the first 5 or 10 minutes, which are vitally important because this episode speeds by so fast. And so I always felt lost when watching this episode. I always had this memory of it being really incomplete. Of course, years later, I would see it in its entirety, and I have seen it in its entirety several times. But I always had this sense when I watched this episode of that memory of being completely lost, like I was missing something. Now, and as I said, part of the reason is this episode is incredibly rushed. Like, they really do try to cram too much story into the short runtime of the episode, and I do think the story needs more runtime, and so it does feel a bit rushed and a bit contrived. Particularly the plot about McCoy finding out he only has a year to live, like that, because that's the part of the 5 minutes that I missed. So I was watching, so I jumped in right after, and they're talking about how he has only a year to live. I'm like, wait, what? He only has a year to live? How does this happen? But in the actual episode itself, it happens so damn fast. It's like, oh, it's just at the start to have the scene where McCoy's like, oh, someone on our crew only has a year to live, and Kirk is like, oh, so what's the prognosis? What's going on? I'm like, why doesn't he just ask who it is? And then he does eventually, but McCoy keeps delaying. It's like, well, this person only has a year to live, and Kirk's like, yeah, who is it? And like, the ship's medical officer. You mean you? Why don't you just say it's me? Why don't you just say, hey Kirk, hey Jim, I only have a year to live, but instead he goes through this all rigmarole. I don't know. But that's it. Then they jump straight into the storyline of this episode. Now, let me talk about this title first. This is, in fact, the longest title in the Star Trek franchise. I actually, when I was doing my polls and I talked about this episode, I actually incorrectly stated that a Discovery episode had surpassed this, but actually I found that that's not true. The Discovery episode in question that I was thinking of was from Season 1 of Discovery. It's called The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, which is also a ridiculously long title, but apparently it is not longer than For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. It is the runner-up. It is now the second longest title in the Star Trek franchise. So For the World is Hollow, blah, 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 remains the champion for having the longest and arguably most pretentious title in the Star Trek franchise. I remember, I remember me and my sister growing up would always make fun of this title because we'd write, when we record the VHS, we'd write a list of all the episodes we recorded so we know which episode was on which VHS. And whenever we talked about this episode, we said, For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, and went out to get something to eat and found I couldn't have any burgers and I didn't want a burger, so I went to the next place and got some fries. Like, we would just make shit up and make this title ridiculously long just to sort of make fun of the fact that this is such a long title. But anywho, here's the main. Let me address first the main complaint about this episode, and that is that the romance between McCoy and Natira is incredibly rushed and fake, and it doesn't work because it's like as soon as they meet each other, like an instant later, like, oh, I love you. And here's the thing, I kind of disagree with that. Or at least, like, I definitely see there's some merit to that complaint, but it doesn't bother me because, first of all, there are other Star Trek episodes that are much worse in the franchise. I know there's some original series episodes that are worse, but I'm mainly thinking of, like, Deep Space Nine ones. Like, there's the one where Sisko, Second Sight, where he meets that imaginary figment woman and falls in love with her in like two seconds. Or and the other complaint, and this addressed the other complaint in the episode, that McCoy would stay behind on this, asteroid and forsake his friends and the Enterprise and everyone he knows just to be with this woman that he just met like 5 seconds ago. However, again, comparing that to a worse example, I would compare it to the Deep Space Nine episode Meridian, where Jadzia Dax elects to stay behind on this planet that phases out of existence with this dude she just met for like 5 seconds or 5 minutes. And that's worse because, first of all, in this example, McCoy only has a year to live. So it makes a little bit more sense that if you're going to die in a year, you probably want to you can spend it with some chick has the hots for you rather than going off and doing work. Like, I don't know. And whereas with Jadzia Dax, like, she had centuries to live, and she's just abandoning all her friends, and this planet's going to phase out of existence for like 70 years. So she's ensuring that she will not see any of the friends, the people she loves or cares about, and everything will be totally different when she comes back. And she's abandoning all of that for this dude she knew for like 20 minutes. That is much more unbelievable than this. Now, okay, so I can hear some people saying, okay, sure, Mark, there's worse examples, but that does not mean that this is not a bad example, which is true. But, you know what, there's a lot of circumstances, not just the McCoy's year to live, which that part of it is contrived, but I'll get to that shortly. But there's a lot of circumstances that actually make me buy this romance. In fact, more than not just those examples, like other examples. As I said, there's some in the original series. I can't think of any specific ones, and I'm sure there's tons of one where Kirk just hooks up with this woman like instantly, and they seem to have no other reason than they both think they're hot. Now, granted, Kirk doesn't decide to live the rest of his life with that woman. He just sleeps with her once and leaves her, which is more believable, I guess. But it's still leaving that aspect of staying behind and being married or whatever. Leave that aspect out of it. I think there's other romances that are more unbelievable. So, and even Next Generation, when like stuff like when Troy met that one dude from Masterpiece Society, that scene, and she seemed to be like, have this huge emotional connection to him when they knew each other for like 5 minutes. I don't know. There's to me, there's a lot worse examples in the Star Trek franchise, but not just that. As I said, the circumstances surrounding this that makes me buy it. First of all, McCoy finding out he only has a year to live. And let me posit this. Let me put myself in McCoy's shoes. Let's say I found out I have this fatal disease and only have a year to live. And the next day, I meet this really hot chick, really attractive woman who really has the hots for me and wants to marry me and spend the rest of my lives together. And which my life is only going to be a year long. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be like, sure, okay. Yeah, why not do that? Let's do that. Rather than, sure, even if it means I have to abandon my family and everyone I know, I'm still going to be like, I can stay behind, be lonely for the rest of my 1 year, and work like a job, or I can just chill out and be with this hot chick who has the hots for me. I want to choose that. To be frank. Now, then the other argument would be like, well, what about the unrealistic part is not McCoy's side, it's Natira's side. Why does she all of a sudden get the hots for McCoy? That's unrealistic. That doesn't happen. I disagree with that too, because here's the thing with, you have to consider the kind of society that she comes from, because there's a line, it's a very important line in the episode where she's talking to the Oracle, and I can't help but think of the African American one from the Matrix every time I say the Oracle, but no, it's the evil computer. It's called the Oracle. Anyway, so she has this line where she says, I am the high priestess, so it is permitted for me to choose my mate. That's key. That means that the rest of society, except for her, she's the one exception, the rest of the society are arranged marriages. And I think it's implied chosen by the Oracle, most likely, since this is a all-powerful computer that controls their whole society. So she's the one exception that gets to choose her mate. And usually it's arranged marriages. So they view marriages differently than what we would do in modern times. Like you can think of other cultures that have arranged marriages. They view marriage in a different light than we do. I had a lot of friends who were from India, or people I knew at least from India, and they some of them had arranged marriages, and they were, perfectly fine with marrying someone they hadn't met before because it was a part of their culture. And that's something as in Western society, modern day society, have a hard time wrapping our brains around, but it's normal for other cultures, and for this particular culture, it is viewed as the norm to not really know someone before you marry them, or and also, like, it should be noted, like, this concept of marriage that we think of now is very modern, as far as, like, if you look at the history of humanity, throughout most of humanity, marriage was not about love and romance. That's more of a modern concept. It was about political alliances and sort of more practical convenience of bringing families together or bringing living situations together, rather than love and romance is more of a modern perspective kind of thing. Although, to be fair, this episode, they do mention love and romance, which is, I guess, the part that people can't buy, because it isn't, to be fair, it's not much of a political alliance. But, again, another reason why I can buy her decision here is that people are naturally attracted to things that are new, to things that are different and new and shiny, and yeah, to be honest, a lot of people, if they're seen as something like sort of fresh or new or different, a lot of people find that really attractive. So I totally buy that she would see this visitor from another world as being like really attractive, and it's obvious like the way she was looking at him immediately, that she kind of had the hots for him, and he looked at her back in that way, yeah, so I buy it, and so it's part of her culture and part of being attractive to things that are new. I mean, she's the high priestess. What if all these other men are just commoners that are subservient to her in her eyes, which I believe would not be, she would be hard to consider them equals to her, unless there's other aristocracy in the society. But of course, this episode didn't go into that kind of detail, so we can only speculate. But it seems like, to me, she would only consider someone like out of this world who's completely special, because there's someone completely different and new, and it makes them a very special person to be worthy of her. So I buy that. And so I buy her wanting to marry him instantly. And plus, it seems like that's part of their culture. That is normal for her to in that society, whereas McCoy is off-put. He's like, we're strangers to each other, we don't know each other, and she's like, no, it's okay. So that makes it clear that that's normal for her society, but not so normal for McCoy. And the only reason, as I said, I already talked about McCoy's reasons for saying yes, which again only has a year to live. Hot chick says, come live the rest of my life with me, who clearly has the hots for him. I buy that he says yes. So overall, I buy this romance. Now, is it the most believable romance ever? No. There are other examples in Star Trek where it's better and makes more sense and developed more. Was this a bit rushed? Yes, as I said, the whole episode is rushed. I think there's too much story to fit in this one episode, which is its main problem. But yeah, as far as the whole romance goes, I don't have an issue with it. And anywho, let me talk about the aspect of the ship, the asteroid ship, and the people think that are actually on the world. Now, this apparently was nothing new when this episode came out. It was an idea that was explored in several science fiction novels. So they were kind of just latched onto that idea. Maybe the first time it was related to in the visual medium. I'm not sure about that. So it's kind of a spin on a somewhat original idea, but the creators of this episode didn't invent it themselves. But yeah, so it's a really interesting concept, and it was done, of course, 5 decades later on the Orville, which, of course, rips off Star Trek and just rips idea from Star Trek. But to be fair, and I talked about this when I reviewed the Orville, I actually do think they improved upon that idea in the Orville, to be totally fair to them. And I do think that episode was better than this one. Mainly because this one's so goddamn rushed. But anyway, but that's part. I still like this. It still is a positive for me of this episode, that the concept of it that's really interesting. That has this world where people are on a ship that's on a collision course and it's going to kill millions of people, but they think they're just on the world. That is a totally believable situation. It's a very interesting scenario as well, and it's interesting to explore. Now, I read some reviews and some people were a bit irritated about how it's not really explained why there's an evil computer that controls everyone, or why the evil computer doesn't want the people in the world to know they're on the ship, and it like kills them or at least hurts them if they try to figure out what's really going on. And that is a bit of plot convenience, I will say. But it doesn't bother me again, because it's like, it's part of this has been going on for thousands of years, so you can only guess to the intentions of the original creators, and why they decided that the people would be better off. Or maybe that's just wasn't their original intention. Maybe it's something that just got degraded over time, which is what happened on the Orville episode. And that I buy. Now, I do think it's a little cliche, particularly for the original series, to have this evil computer says, I am the evil computer, and that controls everyone. They've done this idea so many damn times. Return of the Archons, the Apple, just to name a few. I'm sure there's more I'm not thinking of at the top of my head. So it's a bit of a tired old idea that they just go back to that well repeatedly. So that's probably, to be honest, that's probably my least favorite aspect of this episode, the evil computer. But I think it serves it's a lazy point, because as I said, it's a well that they keep going back to, but it serves the plot well enough. Like, it does it well enough to sort of push the plot forward and to create tension and cause a hurdle for our crew to overcome. Now, here's one thing I'm just a bit unclear of, because I went back and watched this scene twice to see if I could hear something in the captain's log that indicated. So there's a scene where McCoy leaves the Enterprise. He goes and marries Natira, and he gets the little thingy implanted into his head, the torture device, so he could become part of their society. And then the next scene, there's like a commercial break, and we come back and there's a captain's log, and Kirk is like, and the Enterprise is following the asteroid, and this Commodore, contacts Kirk and is like, stop following the asteroid and get back to your just own mission. We're going to send other people to take care of it. This isn't your worry anymore. Go away. Now, here's the question I have. How much time passed during that commercial break? Because I think I remember reading something that implied it was months. Like, it was like 5 or 6 months. Whereas, while you're watching the episode, you assume it was just like a few minutes. Because there's nothing to indicate that there was a huge time jump. But it seems odd to me that the Commodore would, like, tell the Enterprise to leave after it had just been there for 5 minutes. Of course, there have been other examples in the original series where they do shit like that, and it's just plot contrivance. So, but it doesn't make any sense. Although I will say, I think at the end of the episode they implied that because at the start they said it would take the ship a year to hit their target, and I think towards the end of the episode they still said a year. So that implies there wasn't a big time jump, unless I'm remembering that miscorrectly. But regardless, like, to me, I'm just in my own head canon, I assume there was a time jump, because I think that makes the episode better if there was a time jump, and that explains why the Commodore, because if the Enterprise has spent like 4 or 5 months following this asteroid, that explains why the Commodore's like, quit fucking around with this asteroid and go off and do better things. You're a flagship, come on. That makes sense then. If it was just like 2 days, it's like, chill the fuck out, Commodore. Give him a little bit more time. His friend just left. But anyway, and plus, like, he doesn't seem concerned. I guess he did say, like, Starfleet Command was going to take over. He's not saying, oh, fuck, there's billions of people on that planet that are going to die. He just said it's not your concern anymore, Kirk, which, again, this is kind of like, that. To me, all that makes more sense if there's a big time jump there. Also, it makes more sense for the McCoy Natira relationship, because that means they had been together for like 4 or 5 months, and that makes me buy the ending of the episode a lot more to how they're like, oh, I love you, let's depart, because if they're only together for a week or even like 2 or 3 days, then why would they like, that's fake. Also, it would make sense why McCoy changed his mind. Because here's the problem I have with the ending of the episode. Is that they defeat the Oracle and they course correct the ship. So it's not going to crash anymore. But it's at this moment, before they discover the miracle cure for McCoy, which, believe me, I'll get to this. But it's before they discover the miracle cure for McCoy that McCoy decides to leave. And that threw me off, because what's changed? Like, before, and even Natira is like, no, McCoy, when McCoy says, I'll stay with you, Natira's like, no, McCoy is not destined to stay, talking all grandiose as she does. McCoy will not stay with me. McCoy will go and live and not stay here to die. But that's what she convinced him to do in the first place, and that's what he agreed to do in the first place. Like, what's changed? The fact that they defeated that evil computer thingy, and the fact that the ship is no longer on a collision course. Hey, Natira didn't even know or believe that the ship was on a collision course, so that's not something that she ever considered. So that wouldn't make any difference to her. And McCoy, what does he care if the ship is on a collision course? He was willing to stay and die with the people because he was like, oh, I'm on a collision course myself. So the fact that the evil computer doesn't control it, shouldn't that be more motivation for McCoy to stay behind? Because he no longer has to have this torture device implanted in his head, and he no longer has to follow this, have this evil computer be a threat among him. Now he can live free with his new wife. Why would he change his mind? I'm sorry, but that makes zero sense. But as I said, if there was that time jump, I guess suppose that would explain it a bit better to me, because that means maybe after spending 4 months with her, he got a bit sick of her. Or he started to realize, not maybe even sick of her, but started to realize that that's not the place he belonged, and he belonged back in the Enterprise or whatnot, and he belonged out in the stars. Okay, so then it becomes more believable if there was a time jump, like 4 or 5 month time jump. So I wish they would have specified, and they should have. And the fact that would have increased the stakes of the episode. They could even say it was like a 10 month or 11 month time jump, so that the asteroid was close to hitting its target. I think that would have really helped the episode a lot, and that would make it so that McCoy got to spend a whole year with this woman. So they could imply they had this long-lasting relationship, and McCoy realized. But either that, or have them find out the miracle cure for McCoy first, and then he decides, well, I gotta return to the Enterprise. I'm actually gonna live a long life. But I suppose that's kind of a bit, he might be a bit, some might see him as being a bit of an asshole to her. She's like, well, I only wanted to be with you if I was gonna die. Now I'm gonna live. Fuck off. But they also portray her again. She also is totally like, yes, McCoy will go out and live. So she's kind of pushing him away too. She's like, I'm sick of you too. Go away. No, that's definitely not how they portray it. They portray it as a bittersweet passing, that they still love each other. An interesting tidbit to this is that at the end of the episode, Kirk says, oh, actually, I think this is where they imply it's still going to be a year before the asteroid. No, it's going to be a year before the asteroid arrives at their destination that they're going to colonize. So that's a different destination than the planet was going to hit. So never mind. Maybe they didn't even mention this, or maybe there was a time jump. But anyway, Kirk mentions to McCoy that, in a year they're going to arrive at their colony and colonize the world, and we can make plans to be back there. McCoy's like, great. So they're implying that he's going to be reunited with her again and see her again, and it's going to be an ongoing relationship. But, of course, this is the 60s. This is Star Trek, the original series, and of course it's never followed up on ever again. Now, I was interested to see if there was any, because I know a lot of Star Trek novels and non-canon material like to follow up on abandoned threads like this. And I tried to look it up to see if there was anything, and the only thing I managed to find is there was an episode of the fan-created Star Trek New Voyages, or Star Trek Phase 2, which I had seen. after researching it, it makes me want to watch more of it, because I've watched some other Star Trek fan created films and stuff, and I didn't really care for it, and I didn't want to talk about it on my channel because I don't want to discourage that, because I thought it was a cool concept and a lot of people put a lot of hard work and did stuff for free to create this, and I don't want to discourage that. But one of these days I might review or talk about New Voyages, because it's actually decent. At least the one episode I saw of it I liked. So there was going to be an episode of New Voyages that was going to be a sequel to this, that was actually filmed, but it was never edited and never shown because CBS put an end to all sort of fan created projects and fan fiction. And it was like they created all these harsh guidelines for doing fan fiction. At first it was just like no, but then there was like they negotiated where they would allow like some fan fiction, but it would have to be under strict, harsh guidelines, which New Voyages doesn't meet. So basically, they filmed this episode, but they never finished editing it or adding special effects, and they probably never will, and they probably never will be able to release it because of the strict guidelines CBS put on them are too strict. Which I think is bullshit. I think that was a stupid business decision. Let's just forget about any intellectual or creative aspects of it. I think it's a stupid business decision for CBS to do, because this fan created material just help create more buzz for Star Trek, which is good for your bottom dollar. So I don't know why they would fight against that. I mean, I understand why they would want to sort of control it, because they don't want to be competing with fan created material that they don't have the rights to, but they should be able to control it to a point where they can still be released. It just can't earn any money. In that case, it would just create buzz for but whatever, I'm not here to talk about that. I might do a whole nother video for that. Point is, there was an episode of New Voyages that never got to be released. Even though it was already filmed, that was a sequel to For the World Is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. And I watched the trailer for it, and it actually looked kind of interesting, I gotta say. It had the dude from Battlestar Galactica, who was in the original Battlestar Galactica. I think he plays Starbuck, and he reappeared in the Ronald D. Moore Battlestar Galactica as like the evil politician or terrorist type guy. I can't remember his name. It's been a while since I've seen that show. Anyway, had that actor was in this episode playing an evil sort of menacing guy. He kind of took over Yolanda, whatever the name of the asteroid is, and he was like proposing to kill all these people. In fact, in the preview, they show him destroying the Enterprise. And Kirk's like, you just killed everyone in the Enterprise. So either there's going to be some time travel involved, or there was a trickery and they didn't actually destroy the Enterprise, which is probably more likely. But I'll never know, because I'll never get to see the episode because it's never going to be made. But McCoy had to he touched base with Natira again. They sort of resparked the relationship, and that would be very interesting to see. I would. Actually, I'm really disappointed I can't see that. Because it would be, even if it's not canon, it would be interesting to read a beta canon or see a beta canon story that continues the story with McCoy and Natira. Because as I said, I actually kind of bought it. I actually kind of liked it, I think. And here's my main point. Let me get back to my main point about this episode being rushed. And I guess this has a lot more to do with the Only the Year to Live, because that storyline seemed just, as I said, flung right in there to a point where I never really bought it, and it seemed pure plot contrivance to give McCoy an excuse to want to stay with this woman, because, as I said, without that, you don't buy it as much that he would be willing to stay with her. It would be like a Jadzia Dax situation in Meridian, which you totally don't buy, and it's a bunch of bullshit. But because they added that plot point, it made it more believable, but the plot point itself just felt like just thrown in there. And it was, oh, I have a disease. How did I get it? Where did it come from? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Just telling you out of nowhere, out of the blue, I have this disease, and by the end of the episode, it will be magically cured. Oh, they just so happen to have the cure for this one disease on the asteroid that they're investigating. What a lucky coincidence! So that's the part of the episode I don't buy, and plus, like, they don't take enough time to explore the culture of this asteroid, and well, I keep calling it an asteroid, it's really a ship. But anyway, they they don't take the time to explore. Like, they had a lot of interesting world building and background. You just don't. They don't build enough. And as I said, like, they could have actually spent more time on the Natira and McCoy relationship to make it more believable. Maybe people would buy more that they would get together that fast if they showed more time with them together, but the episode just had to go. It makes me feel like this almost would have been better as like a 2-hour episode or a two-parter, or maybe even like if just assume we're not talking about the original series here or the 60s, even like a prolonged story arc where it happens. I could see this in like a modern show, like towards the beginning of the season, McCoy goes off and he stays with the people and he's with her for like throughout most of the season while Enterprise is off doing other things, and then we check in with McCoy every once in a while, see what he's up to, in like a Game of Thrones type scenario where we had people over here doing one thing and people over here doing another. But of course, that's my modern brain thinking it's nothing that would ever happen in the 60s in an episodic show like this. But I think it would be served better, which is my point. And my point is I don't think it's served that well in this particular format. Even if you're talking about, let's forget about the serialized thing, let's say if it's like a 2-hour movie or a book or something that's a longer format, I think this 45-minute or 50-minute, however long episode is not long enough to serve the story, and I think that's a lot of the main issue that people have, and that's my main issue too. Especially that miracle cure. Like, that was so lazy. Oh, here it is. It just so happens to be the cure to save him. One thing I do have to mention, I absolutely have to mention, is that I saw a user review on IMDb that the title of the review was McCoy joins a cult to get laid. That's really clever. That's a really funny title. I don't know if it accurately describes it, but it's really close. Oh, yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about is there's this old guy who appears, and he comes out of nowhere, and he says the title of the episode, which is really long. For the world is hollowed out, and then he like tries to tell him about how he climbed a mountain, which is forbidden. He actually touched the sky, and then the Oracle killed him, which that's pretty brutal, but plot convenience. You have to have the old man spouting out exposition right before he dies to create the mystery of the episode. Anywho, that guy looked very familiar to me, and then I placed it right away that it was the dude he appeared in The Cage, and I looked it up and it was the same actor who appeared in The Cage, but he also appeared in Return of the Archons, which I didn't recognize him from there. I guess he's one of the people who's come for the festival. Anywho, I recognize him from The Cage though, because he's playing the same kind of character. He's playing them the same kind of way, because The Cage, he was one of the old dudes who was like he's just an illusion, but he's one of the survivors of the colony or the ship when the Enterprise and Pike first beamed down, and he's like, oh, they're humans, and you find out they're just illusions, but he's acting like the same kind of way, like kind of all weird. But I also found out when I did some research that they used the same exact musical cue for this scene when he appears, for the same musical cue they used in The Cage when he appeared there. So that's probably why I was like, dude from The Cage. Anyway, yeah. So that was pretty interesting as well. And another thing about this episode that did work for me is the whole mythology that Spock is brings up the Fabrini, is the race of aliens who are the descendants of these aliens that they meet here. So basically, they can, and apparently they talk about Fabrini as being this world that got destroyed thousands of years ago in the Star Nova. But I wish they would have, and that's good world building, and I like that aspect of it. But I wish they would have built on that more. Like, how does they know? Like, how does Spock and Kirk know of this? Is it like a well-known, archaeology curiosity? Is it known to circles like Easter Island or other like ancient civilizations? And in modern times, is it like that, where like a lot of people love to study and it's interesting what happened to the Fabrini? And they could even, if it was, they could build more of, oh my god, it'd be like discovering this huge discovery. They would be like, oh my god, we found out what happened to Fabrini, this ancient, mysterious people, and they're right here. But they didn't really. I could imagine like Next Generation doing that with Picard, where Picard's like doing his archaeological conference and let me study the Fabrini people, and then he discovers them. He would be flattered. He'd be amazed. He's like, Will, do you know who this is? This is the actual Fabrini. And something like that, where Kirk and Spock are like, I think this is the Fabrini. I think you're right. Okay, whatever. Like, they're too nonchalant about it. If it's like this huge like mythology like thing, and that's like the scientific curiosity in archaeological circles or anthropology, you'd think that they would be a bit more excited about it, but whatever. Anyway, my rating for the World is Hollow, and I Have Touched the Sky, and then I went out and grabbed a burger, and then I had something to drink, and then I went down to the... Okay, so I'll stop now. My rating for this episode, out of 10, I'm actually going to give this a 7. Very good. I actually like this episode, which is surprising. I guess a lot of people don't like it, which I can see why. It's not like an amazing episode or anything like that, but there's enough curiosity, there's enough interesting world building and interesting concepts to keep me going. And plus, I gotta be honest, I actually, and this is probably what I'm most contrary to most people about, I actually enjoy the McCoy storyline. For once, I enjoyed that McCoy was the one they focused on having the romance, and not fucking Kirk. It's always Kirk. Sometimes Spock, but usually Kirk. Almost never McCoy. I mean, your Man Trap is the first episode ever did. I know, but that episode wasn't very good, so I'm not... I don't care about that. We usually don't follow McCoy in these having these romantic flings, and I actually, as I said, I think they actually, even though the whole story was rushed as all fuck, they sold it to me. They made it believable. I dare say even more believable than many of these Kirk romances. And they made me interested. Like, I would have, as I said, I would be interested to see a sequel to this, even if it wasn't canon, to see the possibilities of what McCoy, what it would be like if he was ever reunited with Natira. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of doubt that they would live their lives happily ever after and be married for the rest of their lives, because eventually they realize they don't really know each other and break up. But it's an interesting concept that he only has a year to live, and yeah, why not spend it with this hot chick who has the hots for me? Anyway, that's it for my review for The World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check back here as I continue to review episodes of Star Trek and cover many more Star Trek videos and whatnot. Also cover many other shows like The Expanse, Better Call Saul, The Outer Limits, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.